Have you ever had that deep down feeling that time with your loved ones would just stretch on forever? Those laughs, those familiar smiles, that comforting tone of voice, it's like they'll always be there with you. Maybe at a peaceful afternoon fishing with Grandpa, or a warm secret share with Mother in the kitchen, or that indescribable feeling of security, holding hands with your life partner. In those moments, it feels like time stands still, that these precious moments will never end. But the real story lies hidden in the relentless flow of time. Those quiet, unnoticed changes slowly seep into our lives, and often we don't fully realize what's happening. Not until that irreversible moment arrives. And then, looking back, we realize that all the signs were actually there. Those small, seemingly insignificant details were, in fact, harbingers of a great truth. In this video, we're going to talk about those silent cries, those subtle warnings. We'll set aside the misconception that death and old age usually happen suddenly and focus on those vital signals that the body actually sends months, sometimes even a year in advance. These 5 signs indicate that an elderly loved one is nearing the final stages of their life. Perhaps you've noticed some of them but brushed them off as just old age. Maybe you thought they were minor changes, but they were actually signaling the body's gradual shutdown. Recognizing these signs early gives you the opportunity to provide better care, cherish meaningful last memories, and most importantly, ensure that their final stage of life is spent with comfort, dignity, and peace. Stay with us until the end, because these 5 signs can help you prepare emotionally and practically for what lies ahead. When you understand what's happening, you won't be caught off guard. You'll be able to make the most of that precious time you have left with those you love. Now, let's get started. 1. Significant weight loss. One of the first and most striking changes I experienced in the year leading up to the end of my life was unintentional weight loss. At first, it was very subtle, like a belt suddenly needing to be tightened another notch, or the clothes I wore feeling a little looser. My appetite had also slightly decreased. I didn't crave food the way I used to. My family initially thought it was just a natural part of aging. He's not as active as he used to be, they'd say, so his appetite has probably gone down. But deep down, I knew it wasn't just about getting older. My body felt like it was trying to tell me something. As the months passed, this weight loss became more pronounced. My face looked gaunt. The fullness of my cheeks was gone. My arms and legs seemed to thin out like dried up tree branches. When I looked in the mirror, the strong, vigorous man I once knew was gone, replaced by a frilier, weaker silhouette. Eating no longer brought the same pleasure. Even my favorite foods seemed to have changed in taste. Sometimes I'd take a bite or two and feel full. Other times I'd just stare blankly at the food on my plate. The doctors ran various tests, but they couldn't find a definitive cause. Loss of appetite is normal in old age, they said. Try to eat smaller portions. Take nutritional supplements. My family did their best. They cooked my favorite meals, prepared protein shakes. But no matter how hard they tried, the weight loss wouldn't stop. It felt like my body was withering away from the inside. Looking back now, I understand it wasn't just a loss of appetite. My body wasn't absorbing nutrients as efficiently as it used to. My muscle mass was decreasing. My vital systems were slowing down. Aging naturally leads to some muscle loss, but this rapid and uncontrolled loss I experienced was a sign of something much deeper. My body might have been struggling to digest food properly, or maybe it wasn't processing protein effectively. This led to weakness, an increased risk of falls, a weakened immune system, and vulnerability to infections. Furthermore, I now better understand that underlying medical conditions could have played a role in this weight loss. Perhaps there was an illness progressing inside me that I wasn't aware of at the time. I now know that even conditions like depression or cognitive decline can reduce appetite and trigger this downward spiral. While my family was trying to encourage me to eat more, perhaps the real focus should have been on understanding the deeper reasons behind my body's changes. If we had recognized the signal better in those days, maybe I could have spent my last days differently. Focusing on foods that were easier to eat and wouldn't tire me out as much might have slightly improved my quality of life. But back then, we just thought it was a quirk of old age. Now I understand that unintentional and significant weight loss, especially when accompanied by decreased appetite, weakness, and a decline in activity is an important message your body is whispering to you. Hearing this message early allows you to navigate the end of life with your loved ones in a more conscious, compassionate, and meaningful way. 2. Extreme fatigue and weakness. Alongside the weight loss, another prominent change I felt in my body was a deep and persistent fatigue that just wouldn't go away. This wasn't the ordinary tiredness you feel after a long day. This was an overwhelming exhaustion that drained me of the energy to do anything. Even getting out of bed became a major effort. Walking across the room felt like climbing Mount Everest. Things I used to do easily, like cooking, getting dressed, or even having a conversation with my loved ones, started to feel too draining. At first, I also attributed this to the natural decline in energy that comes with age. I'm not young anymore, I'd tell myself. Of course, I'll get tired more easily. But this fatigue grew unbearable over time. No matter how much I rested, it didn't lift. I'd take long naps in the afternoons, but even after waking up, I still felt completely drained. It was like there was an invisible weight inside me, constantly pulling me down. Now I understand that this wasn't just a consequence of aging. My body was trying to conserve its remaining energy. As my organs began to slow down, my body prioritized the most vital functions. My heart wasn't pumping as efficiently as it used to, my circulation had weakened, and my muscles weren't getting the same level of oxygen they once did. That's why I constantly felt weak, unsteady, and unable to maintain the same level of activity I once enjoyed. My metabolism had also slowed down. My body was designed to produce and use energy, but as it prepared for its final phase, that energy was being redirected. Instead of fueling movement, the body seemed to shift into a kind of preservation mode, focusing more on internal processes. This is why I needed to sleep more during the day, took longer naps in the afternoons, and found it harder to stay awake for extended periods. There were even times when my energy levels would suddenly plummet. One moment I'd feel okay, and the next I'd be completely exhausted. Perhaps the most heartbreaking aspect of this process was the emotional impact of fatigue. I had always taken pride in my independence, being able to handle everything myself, not being a burden on anyone, was important to me. But now, I struggle with even the simplest tasks. This made me very frustrated and at times, even embarrassed. I started withdrawing from conversations, avoiding social interactions. Even the hobbies I once enjoyed no longer held any appeal because I simply didn't have the energy for them. It wasn't that I didn't care. My strength had just given out. This situation was also very painful for my loving family. Watching someone who was once active and cheerful slowly fade away wasn't easy. Sometimes I could sense that they thought I was being lazy or that if he just pushed himself a little harder, he'd get better. But the truth is, forcing activity wouldn't have changed anything. What mattered most was understanding my limitations, allowing me to rest when I needed it, and making my remaining days as comfortable as possible. In the end, what truly matters isn't how much someone can do, but how loved, understood, and at ease they feel. If you notice a loved one experiencing deep, ongoing fatigue that isn't relieved by rest, take it as a sign that their body is going through a major transition. This is a time to cherish conversations, create moments of peace, and support them without expectations. Because in the end, it's not about how much they can accomplish, but that they feel loved and understood. 3. Increased cognitive confusion or withdrawal. As I approached the final stage of my life, one of the most noticeable changes wasn't just physical. It was in how I thought, communicated, and interacted with others. You might have noticed that someone who was once sharp and engaged started to forget things more often, struggled to follow conversations, or seemed disoriented in familiar places. They might repeat themselves, forget names, or lose track of time, even if they never had memory issues before. These subtle cognitive changes can happen months or even a full year before death. This isn't just everyday forgetfulness. It's something more profound. The brain, just like any other organ, requires a steady flow of oxygen and nutrients to function properly. But as my circulation weakened and the oxygen supply to my brain decreased, my cognitive function started to decline. I became easily confused, had difficulty making decisions, or struggled to recognize people and places I had known for years. There were even times when I'd have brief moments of clarity, followed by sudden episodes of confusion, almost as if my mind was flickering in and out. Doctors mentioned the possibility of dementia or the early stages of Alzheimer's and conducted various tests. However, the results didn't provide a definitive diagnosis. Now I understand that it wasn't just memory problems. My brain, like the rest of my body, was slowing down. Another significant change was emotional withdrawal. I used to be very social, enjoyed talking to people, and being with my family and friends always energized me. But lately, my interest in social interactions had diminished. I spoke less, became less involved, and spent long periods just sitting in silence. It wasn't that I didn't care about my loved ones. It was just that my brain no longer processed emotions and engagement in the same way. Conversations became tiring, loud environments felt overwhelming, and eventually, I retreated into my own world. You might have also noticed changes in my mood and behavior. I used to be a calm and patient person, but lately, I became quicker to anger, more anxious, or easily frustrated. At other times, I felt a strange indifference to everything. Things that used to upset or please me no longer held any significance. I now know that this wasn't just a personality shift. It was often a result of my brain adjusting to my body's overall decline. As my cognitive function slowed, it became harder to express emotions, and I stopped reacting to situations the way I used to. This period was especially difficult for my family. Watching someone they loved lose touch with reality or withdraw emotionally felt like losing me before I was actually gone. But it's important to remember that this wasn't something I could control. Instead of trying to pull me back into conversations, the best thing they could do was meet me where I was, speak gently, offer reassurance, and understand that even if I didn't always respond, I could still feel their presence. If you notice a loved one becoming more forgetful, more confused, or less engaged, don't ignore it. These are often early signs that the body and mind are preparing for the final transition. This is a time to be patient, cherish quiet moments, and focus on creating an environment that feels safe, familiar, and peaceful. Because even when words fade, love and comfort can still be felt. 4. Frequent infections and slow healing. As my body began to wind down, one of the clearest physical signs was a weakened immune system. I used to rarely get sick before. Flu seasons didn't really affect me, and my small cuts would heal quickly. But in the last year, it felt like I was catching every cold, every flu, every little infection that went around. Illnesses that used to be minor now took much longer to recover from, and simple wounds like a small cut or a bruise healed noticeably slower. At first, I thought these were just coincidences. The weather is changing, I'd say. Your immunity drops as you get older. But these infections started recurring so frequently that I knew this wasn't normal. Pneumonia, urinary tract infections, UTIs, skin infections, and even oral infections became very common. My immune system seemed unable to protect me anymore. Even antibiotics, which used to work quickly, seemed less effective. I needed stronger medications, longer treatment periods, or multiple rounds of antibiotics for infections that would have been minor before. This was because my blood circulation was slowing down and the functions of my organs were declining. My body simply couldn't respond to treatments as well as it used to. Another often overlooked issue was chronic wounds. If you notice that small scratches, sores, or bruises weren't healing properly or kept reopening, it could mean that my circulation was compromised. Poor blood flow meant that oxygen and nutrients weren't reaching my skin and tissues efficiently, making healing much slower than usual. Pressure sores, especially for those who are less mobile, became a serious risk and could lead to dangerous infections if not carefully managed. What was even more concerning was that the symptoms of the infections I had in my final year often didn't look the way we expected. Instead of a high fever, I'd usually just feel more tired than usual, more confused, or less interested in eating. In fact, for seniors, a sudden decline in mental alertness is often the first warning sign of an infection, even before other symptoms appear. This is why recognizing these changes early could have made a difference in how much comfort and support I received in my final stage of life. For my family, these repeated infections were very frustrating and heartbreaking. It was tempting to push for more aggressive treatments, hoping that one more round of antibiotics or one more hospital stay would fix the problem. But at a certain point, our focus often shifted from curing to comforting. Making sure I stayed hydrated, Keeping my skin clean and moisturized and minimizing stress on my body could do more for my well-being than another round of medication that would only prolong suffering. If you notice a loved one experiencing frequent infections and slow healing wounds, please know that this isn't just a sign of age-related weakness. It's an important indication that their body is losing its ability to defend itself. During this time, focusing on making them comfortable and providing a peaceful environment may be far more valuable than aggressive medical interventions. 5. Major changes in breathing or circulation. One of the most telling signs that my body was preparing for its final stage was a noticeable change in my breathing patterns and circulation. You might have noticed that I was breathing more slowly or shallowly than before. At times, I would pause between breaths, or my breathing might become irregular, speeding up and then slowing down unexpectedly. Sometimes I experienced a gentle, rhythmic breathing pattern called Cheyne-Stokes respiration, where my breathing alternated between deep, rapid breaths and long pauses. These changes started subtly, but over time, they became more pronounced and more frequent. Another common sign was weakened circulation. You might have noticed that my hands, feet, or even my nose and ears felt constantly cold to the touch. My skin may have appeared pale, bluish, or mottled, especially around my fingers and toes. This happened because my body was prioritizing blood flow to my vital organs, reducing circulation to my extremities. It was a clear indication that my heart wasn't pumping as strongly as it used to. Some people also experience more shortness of breath, even with minimal movement. Simply sitting up speaking or shifting positions might have caused me to feel winded or out of breath. You might have noticed me breathing through my mouth more often, or I might have suddenly needed to stop and catch my breath while talking. If I was once able to walk across the room easily but now struggled to do so, my lung function might have been declining. In some cases, fluid buildup in the lungs could make breathing more difficult. This could cause a persistent cough, gurgling sounds, or even a feeling of tightness in my chest. Many people might assume it's just congestion from a cold, but in elderly individuals nearing the end of life, it's often a sign that the lungs are weakening. This could make lying flat uncomfortable, and I might have preferred to sleep propped up on pillows or in a recliner to ease my breathing. For my family, seeing these changes could be frightening. It's natural to want to help, to encourage me to take deeper breaths, or to worry that something urgent was happening. But in many cases, this was simply my body's natural way of slowing down. There might not always be a way to reverse these changes, but there were ways to make me more comfortable. Keeping the room cool, using a humidifier, or offering small sips of water could help ease discomfort. In some cases, medications or oxygen therapy could provide relief, but the focus shifted toward comfort rather than trying to fix the issue. If you notice these signs, changes in breathing, cold hands and feet, or a bluish tint to the skin, pay attention. These are often indicators that the body is conserving energy and that circulation is slowing down. It's a time to be present, offer reassurance, and create a peaceful environment where they feel safe and at ease. In these final months or weeks, the most important thing you can give them isn't medical intervention. It's comfort, dignity, and the knowledge that they are not alone. As we reach the end of this video, take a moment to reflect on what we discussed. Significant weight loss, extreme fatigue, cognitive decline, frequent infections, and major changes in breathing and circulation. These 5 signs often appear in a year, leading up to an elderly person's passing. They may not all happen at once, and they may not always be obvious at first, but when you start noticing them, it's a sign that the body is preparing for its final transition. For many families, these changes can be difficult to accept. It's natural to want to fight against them, to encourage a loved one to eat more, move more, or push through exhaustion. But sometimes, the best thing we can do is listen to what their body is telling us. Instead of focusing on trying to reverse the inevitable, we can focus on making their remaining time as peaceful, comfortable, and meaningful as possible. Understanding these signs isn't about fearing death. It's about being prepared for it. When you recognize these changes early, you can offer better care, make important decisions ahead of time, and ensure that your loved one's final months are filled with love and dignity. This is a time for cherishing moments, sharing stories, and letting them know they are valued and not alone. If you're noticing these signs in someone close to you, take a deep breath and remember you are not alone in this journey. Many families have walked this path before, and while it is never easy, knowing what to expect can help you find strength, patience, and peace. Thank you for joining us today. We'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment below and share one thing you learned today and how you plan to use it in your life. Your thoughts are important to us, so don't hesitate to share them. Reading your comments gives us great motivation and encouragement. If you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, please like, subscribe, and share. Your support helps us continue creating good content to inform and inspire you. Thanks for watching, and we look forward to seeing you in the next video.